When we were young, we wrote with pencils and erasers to correct our mistakes. But as we grew older, we transitioned to pens, where mistakes left permanent marks on the page. This shift mirrors the philosophy of life. Even the smallest misstep can leave an indelible mark. 7 wildlife officers learned this lesson the hard way, making a critical error that forever altered their lives. Join us as we delve into their stories and the consequences they faced. The Siberian wilderness in January is a place of profound stillness where the frozen expanse stretches endlessly, interrupted only by patches of dense forest and the occasional rugged outcrop. The snow-covered terrain, glittering under a pale sun, hides a dangerous secret. It is home to the Russian grizzly bear, a creature as majestic as it is deadly. On January 9, 2025, a team of 7 wildlife officers experienced in managing these powerful animals ventured into this forbidding landscape on a routine relocation mission. What unfolded that day would forever change the way such operations were conducted. The group, led by Ivan Tikhonov, a seasoned officer with over a decade of experience in wildlife management, included Viktor Gorsky, a tranquilizer specialist, Alexei Petrov, a logistics coordinator, Dmitry Sorokin, a veterinarian, Yuri Karpov, a tracker, Pavel Mikhailov, a driver, and Andrei Volkov, the youngest of the team, eager to prove himself. Their task was straightforward yet dangerous: relocate a Russian grizzly bear that had wandered too close to human settlements. The bear had recently been spotted near the outskirts of a small Siberian village, scavenging for food, its natural habitat likely disturbed by illegal logging. The officers traveled in 2 sturdy vehicles, equipped with tranquilizer guns, safety equipment, and a reinforced cage for transporting the bear. They arrived at the forest's edge in the early morning, the air biting and heavy with the promise of snow. The officers parked their vehicles safely from the bear's den, relying on Yuri's tracking skills to lead them to the site. The plan was to tranquilize the bear, secure it in the transport cage, and release it in a remote area far from human activity. The den was nestled in a thicket of trees, partially hidden by snow and undergrowth. The officers moved cautiously, their breaths visible in the frigid air, their boots crunching softly against the snow. Ivan instructed the team to spread out, positioning themselves strategically to block the bear's escape routes. The atmosphere was tense but focused. They had done this many times before. As the group prepared their equipment, Pavel, distracted by a crackling message on the radio, accidentally left the driver's door of one vehicle ajar. It was a small oversight, but one with catastrophic consequences. Unbeknownst to the team, the bear, already on edge from the commotion near its den, had been watching them. Drawn by the scent of food left in the vehicle, it emerged suddenly from the thicket, a massive, hulking figure against the snowy backdrop. The first officer to notice the bear was Victor, who warned the others. The bear, agitated and aggressive, charged directly toward the open vehicle. The team scrambled to deploy their tranquilizers, but the situation rapidly descended into chaos. The bear's sheer speed and ferocity caught them off guard. Before anyone could react, it reached the vehicle, its powerful claws ripping through the seats as it searched for the source of the scent. Pavel, attempting to retrieve the tranquilizer gun from the back of the vehicle, became the bear's first target. The animal lunged at him, its massive jaws clamping down on his shoulder, dragging him to the ground. The team, horrified but determined, tried to intervene. Ivan and Victor fired tranquilizer darts, but the thick fur and adrenaline-fueled rage of the bear rendered the initial doses ineffective. Alexei and Dmitry rushed to assist Pavel, but the bear swiped at them with terrifying force, its claws tearing through their protective clothing. The clearing erupted into a frenzy of shouts and growls. The snow stained crimson as the bear turned its attention to the remaining officers. Yuri and Andrei, positioned farther from the vehicle, attempted to flank the animal, hoping to draw it away from their fallen comrades. Andrei, armed with a tranquilizer gun, managed to land a shot on the bear's flank, but it only seemed to enrage the creature further. The bear charged at him, knocking him to the ground before Yuri could react. Seeing his team overwhelmed, Ivan shouted orders to regroup, but the bear's ferocity left little room for coordination. One by one, the officers fell, their attempts to subdue the animal futile against its raw power. The bear, its primal instincts fully awakened, delivered swift and devastating blows, leaving no chance for survival. The attack lasted mere minutes but felt like an eternity. When the bear finally retreated into the dense forest, the clearing was silent, save for the wind and the soft patter of falling snow. The 7 officers' bodies lay scattered, their equipment broken, and their mission tragically unfinished. A search team discovered the scene hours later, sending shockwaves through Russia's wildlife management community. The scale of the tragedy was unprecedented, raising urgent questions about the safety protocols for handling dangerous predators in remote regions. Investigators determined that the bear's heightened aggression was likely due to its disrupted habitat and the stress of human intrusion near its den. The open vehicle door and the scent of food only exacerbated the situation, creating a perfect storm of circumstances that led to the attack. The loss of Ivan, Viktor, Alexei, Dmitry, Yuri, Pavel, and Andrei devastated their families, colleagues, and the broader conservation community. Vigils were held in their honor, and their names became a solemn reminder of the risks faced by those who work to protect and manage wildlife. The incident spurred significant changes in safety protocols, including mandatory double checks of all vehicles and equipment, increased use of remote tranquilizer delivery systems, and enhanced training for officers on handling high-stress encounters with predators. In the aftermath, the bear was not pursued. Wildlife experts argued that the attack was not the result of malice, but rather a tragic intersection of human error and instinct. The forest, as unforgiving as it is beautiful, had simply reminded humanity of its place in the natural order. Though tragic, the deaths of the 7 officers led to greater awareness and improvements in how dangerous predators were managed, ensuring that their sacrifice was not in vain. The early summer morning of June 18, 2015, dawned clear and cool in the rugged wilderness of Wyoming. Kevin Harris, a 32-year-old outdoor enthusiast, had set out for a solo ride on one of the state's most popular off-road trails. Known as Teton's Crest, the trail snaked through dense forests, rocky outcrops, and steep descents, offering challenge and exhilaration to mountain bikers. Kevin was no stranger to the wild. He had ridden these trails many times before, confident in his skills and familiarity with the terrain. But the wilderness, unpredictable and indifferent, had its plans that day. Kevin pedaled hard as the trail wound through groves of pine and aspen trees. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, birds chirping, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the occasional snap of a branch underfoot. He relished the solitude, the rhythmic hum of his tires on the dirt path, and the adrenaline from navigating sharp turns and steep drops. Teton's Crest was notorious for its technical sections, but it was also beloved for its isolation, cutting deep through bear country. Riders were warned to carry bear spray and make noise on the trails, but Kevin had opted to travel light, eager for speed. As he rounded a bend, the trail began a sharp descent, narrow and hemmed in by thick underbrush. Kevin leaned forward, his tires kicking up dirt and small stones, the wind rushing past his face. He felt the familiar thrill of control balanced on the edge of chaos. But as he hurtled downhill, the dense forest ahead seemed to shift unnaturally, and he saw a massive figure moving through the undergrowth. Before he could react, a grizzly bear emerged onto the trail, no more than 20 feet ahead. It was enormous, its shaggy brown fur bristling as it turned to face him. The bear's dark eyes locked onto Kevin, and it rose slightly on its hind legs. Its presence was unmistakably dominant and territorial. Time seemed to slow as Kevin registered the situation. He had accidentally crossed paths with one of nature's most formidable predators, and there was no time to stop. The bear dropped to all fours and charged. Kevin's instincts took over. He leaned into his handlebars and pedaled furiously, pushing his bike to its limits as he tried to outpace the bear. The grizzly, however, was faster than he had imagined. Its powerful strides sent dirt and debris flying as it closed the distance. The ground trembled under the weight of the animal's pursuit, and Kevin could hear its labored breaths and guttural growls growing louder behind him. The narrow path, littered with roots and loose rocks, left little room for error. Kevin swerved around a jagged boulder, his heart pounding as the bear's shadow loomed behind him. Desperation fueled his speed, but the uneven terrain conspired against him. His front tire struck a hidden root as he rounded another sharp turn, sending him careening off balance. Instantly, Kevin collided with a tree, the impact of which was throwing him off his bike and onto the forest floor. Dazed and disoriented, Kevin barely had time to register the pain in his shoulder and side before the bear was upon him. It roared, swiping at him with claws like hooked knives, tearing through the sleeve of his jersey and raking deep gashes into his arm. Kevin scrambled backward, his hands searching for anything to defend himself. His fingers found the frame of his bike, and he seized it, using it as a makeshift shield. The bear lunged again, claws clanging against the metal frame as Kevin pressed it between them. Frustrated by the obstruction, the grizzly swiped at the bike with enough force to bend the front wheel. Kevin used the momentary distraction to crawl backward, his injured arm throbbing as he struggled to put distance between himself and the animal. The bear charged again, its jaws snapping shut just inches from his leg. With adrenaline, Kevin swung the bike frame at the bear, the movement awkward but desperate. The impact startled the bear, and it hesitated, growling low as it eyed him. Seizing the opportunity, Kevin dragged himself to his feet, clutching the bike frame like a lifeline. His injured arm hung uselessly at his side, blood dripping onto the forest floor. The bear huffed, its ears twitching as it seemed to weigh the effort of continuing the attack. Finally, with a final growl, the animal turned and retreated into the underbrush, leaving Kevin alone in the aftermath. Kevin stood trembling, his breaths ragged as the forest fell eerily silent around him. His legs felt like lead, but he forced himself to move, knowing he needed to find help. With his bike damaged beyond use, he abandoned it and began the grueling journey on foot. Every step sent waves of pain through his body, but he pressed on, driven by the primal need to survive. Hours later, Kevin stumbled onto a nearby trailhead, his vision blurred and his strength fading. A group of hikers found him collapsed on the ground, bloodied and barely conscious. They called for help, and Kevin was airlifted to the nearest hospital, where he underwent surgery to repair the deep lacerations on his arm and shoulder. Doctors marveled at his resilience, noting that his quick thinking and use of the bike frame had likely saved his life. The attack left Kevin with physical scars that would never fully fade, but the emotional toll was just as significant. He struggled with nightmares and a heightened sense of vulnerability in the months that followed. However, Kevin refused to let the experience define him solely as a victim. Instead, he advocated for trail safety, sharing his story to raise awareness about biking risks in bear country. Through public talks and collaborations with local organizations, Kevin pushed for more bear-friendly trail designs, including better signage, the installation of bear-proof food storage, and education campaigns about wildlife encounters. His efforts sparked meaningful changes, with new measures implemented across popular trails in Wyoming to reduce the likelihood of similar incidents. Looking back on that fateful day, Kevin often reflected on the delicate balance between humans and nature. The wilderness, he realized, was neither cruel nor kind. It simply was. His encounter with the grizzly had been a stark reminder of the power and unpredictability of the natural world, and it left him with a profound respect for the creatures that called it home. The morning air along Bear Creek in Colorado was crisp and invigorating, carrying the earthy scent of pine trees and damp soil. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a golden light over the rugged terrain that bordered the winding creek. Park Ranger Claire Thompson, 29, had been assigned to this stretch of wilderness for the past 3 years and intimately knew its paths, wildlife, and rhythms. Despite the challenges of patrolling such a vast area, Claire loved her work. She found solace in the quiet beauty of nature, a stark contrast to the chaos of the urban world she had left behind. Bear Creek, nestled within a national forest near Dolores, Colorado, was a haven for wildlife. Elk grazed in open meadows, foxes darted through underbrush, and black bears roamed the forested slopes. However, one particular bear had been sighted closer to human activity recently. Reports trickled in of a large black bear foraging near campsites and picnic areas, drawn by the smell of food left behind by careless visitors. Though the bear hadn't displayed overtly aggressive behavior, its increasing proximity to people had become a concern. Claire was tasked with monitoring the situation during her routine patrol. That morning, Claire was equipped with her standard gear, a radio, a first aid kit, and bear spray holstered to her side. Her route followed the creek's winding course, where she stopped periodically to check for signs of wildlife activity. Tracks, scat, and claw marks on tree trunks told her the bear had been nearby recently, but she saw no immediate danger. Her footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path as she moved deeper into the forest, the tranquility of the environment wrapping around her like a warm blanket. About an hour into her patrol, Claire noticed a movement up ahead. Through a gap in the trees, she spotted the black bear lumbering along the creek's edge, its powerful frame silhouetted against the dappled sunlight. It was larger than she had anticipated, its glossy coat rippling with each step. The bear appeared calm, sniffing at the ground and occasionally pawing at rocks for food. Claire paused, her breath catching at the sight of the majestic creature. It was a rare opportunity to observe such a magnificent animal up close. Claire's training had emphasized maintaining a safe distance from wildlife, but in the moment, her instincts faltered. The bear didn't seem agitated or aware of her presence. She reached for her camera, a habit born of her love for photography and documenting her experiences in the field. She moved slowly, angling for a better shot, creeping closer as the bear continued foraging. The thrill of the moment clouded her judgment, and she failed to notice subtle signs in the bear's behavior. Its ears twitching, its head lifting, and its body tensing as it became aware of her presence. Suddenly, the bear turned. Its dark eyes locked onto Claire, and the air thickened with tension. She froze, her heart pounding as she realized her mistake. The bear huffed, a deep, guttural sound that echoed through the forest. In an instant, the animal charged. The bear's speed was staggering, and its powerful legs propelled it forward with terrifying force. Claire barely had time to react. She stumbled backward, reaching for her bear spray, but the bear was too quick. It collided with her, and its massive weight knocked her to the ground. The impact sent her head crashing against a rock, and darkness consumed her vision as she lost consciousness. Another park ranger, Ian Fuller, was conducting patrol along a separate trail nearby when he heard the commotion. The sounds of snapping branches and guttural roars cut through the forest's stillness, followed by a sharp, desperate cry that sent chills down his spine. Ian sprinted toward the source of the noise, his boots pounding against the uneven ground. When he arrived, the scene before him was harrowing. The bear stood over Claire's motionless body, its claws raking at the ground and its breath coming in heavy bursts. Ian's mind raced as he weighed his options. He knew firing a weapon at the bear would be a last resort, potentially escalating the situation. Instead, he raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The sharp crack of the gunshot reverberated through the forest, startling the bear. It paused, its ears flicking as it assessed the new threat. Ian shouted and waved his arms, making himself appear larger to intimidate the animal. The bear huffed again, its breath visible in the cool air, before turning and retreating into the dense underbrush. The forest fell silent once more, except for Ian's ragged breathing. Ian rushed to Claire's side, his stomach twisting at the sight of her injuries. Blood seeped from a deep wound on her forehead, and her uniform was torn where the bear's claws had raked across her torso. She was still alive, her breath shallow and labored. Ian radioed for emergency assistance, his voice trembling as he relayed their location. Paramedics arrived within the hour, navigating the rugged terrain with difficulty. Claire was carefully stabilized and airlifted to the nearest hospital, where a team of surgeons worked tirelessly to save her. Despite their efforts, the extent of her injuries proved too severe. Claire succumbed to her wounds later that evening, leaving behind a grieving community and a legacy of dedication to the wilderness she had loved. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the Park Service and the local community. Investigations revealed that Claire's proximity to the bear had triggered its defensive instincts, a sobering reminder of the inherent dangers of wildlife encounters in natural habitats. The incident underscored the importance of adhering to safety guidelines, respecting the boundaries of wild animals, and maintaining a safe distance at all times. The dense wilderness of Montana stretched endlessly in all directions, a tapestry of towering pines, jagged mountains, and vast, empty roads. It was a land of raw beauty and isolation, where nature reigned supreme, and humans were merely visitors passing through. On a crisp autumn morning in 2007, truck driver Dave Thompson rumbled along a lonely highway, hauling a trailer loaded with produce destined for a distant city. The road ahead was quiet, the hum of his engine, the only sound breaking the solitude. Dave had spent years navigating remote routes like these, his life revolving around the rhythm of the open road. A sturdy man in his late 40s, he prided himself on his ability to handle the challenges of long-haul trucking. The isolation suited him, and he relished the moments when he could pull over, stretch his legs, and take in the untouched beauty of the landscapes he traveled through. As the morning wore on, Dave decided to take a break. Spotting a small clearing on the side of the road, he eased his truck to a stop, the hiss of the brakes cutting through the stillness. He climbed from the cab, his boots crunching on gravel as he stretched his arms and shoulders. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of pine needles and damp earth. He didn't notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the unnatural stillness that had settled over the forest nearby. Unbeknownst to Dave, a grizzly bear had been lurking in the vicinity, its keen sense of smell drawing it toward the truck. As the colder months approached, the massive creature with matted fur and sharp claws roamed the area for food. The scent of produce from Dave's trailer had piqued its interest, and it had been following the vehicle's path from the forest, its hunger sharpening its instincts. Dave turned his back to the trees, oblivious to the danger. He reached into the cab for a thermos of coffee, savoring the brief respite from his journey. The bear, hidden in the underbrush, watched him intently. When Dave moved, it interpreted his actions as a threat, its territorial nature overpowering its initial hesitation. In an instant, the bear charged. The attack came without warning. Dave turned just in time to see the massive creature barreling toward him, its sheer size and speed a horrifying blur. He barely had time to react before the bear collided, knocking him off his feet. The impact sent him sprawling onto the gravel, his breath forced from his lungs in a sharp gasp. The bear wasted no time, its primal instincts driving it to secure what it saw as its territory. Its claws raked across Dave's side, tearing through his jacket and into his flesh. Pain seared through him as he struggled to shield himself, his arms raised in a futile attempt to fend off the onslaught. The bear's teeth sank into his leg and he screamed, echoing into the wilderness. Desperation took hold. Through the haze of pain and adrenaline, Dave's hand groped blindly for anything he could use as a weapon. His fingers closed around the cold steel of a crowbar he had left leaning against the truck's tire. He swung the makeshift weapon with every ounce of strength, striking the bear across its shoulder. The blow caused the animal to pause, momentarily stunned. Dave seized the opportunity, swinging again, connecting with the bear's snout. The grizzly snarled, its eyes wild with rage and confusion. Blood dripped from its muzzle, and it backed away slightly, assessing its prey. Dave struggled to his feet, his body trembling and his breaths ragged. He leaned against the side of the truck for support, the crowbar held tightly in his bloodied hands. But the bear wasn't finished. It lunged again, swiping at Dave with a massive paw. The force of the blow sent him crashing back to the ground, his head striking the gravel. Stars danced in his vision, and his grip on the crowbar slackened. The bear loomed over him, its hot breath filling the air, and for a moment, it seemed as though the fight was over. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the bear stopped. Whether it was the lingering pain from Dave's blows or the distant hum of an approaching vehicle, something caused the animal to retreat. It let out a low growl before turning and lumbering back into the forest, its massive frame disappearing into the shadows. Dave lay motionless on the ground, his body a broken testament to the brutality of the attack. Blood pooled around him, staining the gravel as his breaths grew shallow. A passing motorist, alerted by the unusual sight of the parked truck and the commotion, pulled over and rushed to his aid. The man knelt beside Dave, his face pale as he surveyed the extent of the injuries. An emergency call was placed, and paramedics arrived as quickly as the remote location allowed. They worked frantically to stabilize Dave, but the damage was too severe. He had lost too much blood, and the wounds to his side and legs had caused irreversible trauma. Despite their efforts, Dave succumbed to his injuries before he could be transported to a hospital. The news of the attack sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. Wildlife experts later confirmed that the bear's behavior had been driven by hunger and the scent of food from the truck. The incident reignited discussions about the dangers of human-wildlife interactions, particularly in areas where natural habitats intersected with human activity. Dave Thompson's tragic death became a somber reminder of nature's unpredictability and the fine line between coexistence and conflict. His story, which was shared widely in the following months, served as a cautionary tale for those venturing into the wilderness, urging respect for the powerful creatures that call it home. The crisp autumn air in a national park located in interior Alaska carried the scent of pine and earth as Adrian Forster, a 34-year-old outdoor enthusiast, ventured deep into Alaska's untamed wilderness. A seasoned hiker with years of experience exploring rugged terrain, Adrian craved solitude and the kind of peace that only untouched landscapes could provide. On this particular trip, he sought to push himself further than ever, trekking miles beyond the park's marked trails into the heart of the wild. His pack was heavy with supplies, maps, a first aid kit, a satellite phone, and food. He carried bear spray on his hip and a knife in his pocket, a small comfort in an environment where the line between predator and prey blurred. In early September 2024, the weather was ideal for hiking. The days were still warm enough to be pleasant, and the nights were cool enough to make the stars seem brighter. Adrian had meticulously planned this trip, poring over maps and weather reports, ensuring every detail of his journey was accounted for. Yet no amount of preparation could account for the unpredictable nature of the wilderness he loved so dearly. Adrian had been hiking for hours that day, following a remote ridge that provided sweeping views of the valleys below. Rolling tundra hills stretched out in every direction, a patchwork of golden grass and dark green spruce. He paused occasionally to take in the scenery, his breath hitching at the sight of distant snow-capped peaks. The only sounds were the crunch of his boots on the dirt and the soft rustle of the wind through the trees. But as the afternoon wore on, a strange stillness settled over the landscape. The usual chatter of birds and the distant calls of animals faded, replaced by an oppressive silence that set his nerves on edge. The unease was initially subtle, an instinctual awareness that something was out of place. Adrian shrugged it off, reminding himself that the wilderness was inherently unpredictable. He adjusted the straps of his pack and pressed onward, his eyes scanning the ground for signs of wildlife. He had seen bear tracks earlier in the day, but they were old, the edges worn by rain and time. He reasoned that the bear was long gone, likely far from his current location. Then, as Adrian rounded a bend in the ridge, he saw it. A shadow emerged from the trees below, massive and unmistakable, a grizzly bear. Its golden-brown coat glistened in the sunlight, and its powerful muscles rippled as it moved. It seemed unaware of Adrian's presence for a moment, its head low as it sniffed the air. But then, the bear's head snapped up, and its dark eyes locked onto him. The moment stretched, heavy and charged, as the bear assessed him from a distance. Adrian's heart pounded as he froze, trying to remember his training. He knew the bear hadn't charged yet, and there was still a chance to defuse the situation. But before he could move, the bear reared up, its massive frame towering above the ground, and let out a deep, guttural roar that echoed across the ridge. The time for strategy was gone. The bear dropped to all fours and charged. Adrian turned and ran, knowing full well that it was futile. His legs burned as he sprinted downhill, the terrain uneven and treacherous. His pack felt like dead weight, slowing him as the bear closed the gap with terrifying speed. He reached for his bear spray, fumbling with the clasp as his mind raced. The bear was on him before he could raise the canister, its momentum knocking him to the ground. The impact drove the air from Adrian's lungs as he hit the earth, pain radiating through his body. The bear's claws raked across his back, tearing through his jacket and skin. He tried to roll away, but the animal pinned him with its massive paw, its breath hot and rancid against his neck. Desperation took hold as Adrian reached for the knife in his pocket, his fingers trembling as they found the handle. He managed to unsheath the blade and swung blindly, the sharp edge slicing into the bear's shoulder. The grizzly roared in pain, momentarily retreating, but its anger grew. It lunged again, this time clamping its jaws around Adrian's leg. The pain was excruciating, a white-hot fire that consumed him as the bear shook its head violently, dragging him across the dirt. Adrian's vision blurred as he swung the knife again, this time striking the bear's face. The blade cut into its cheek, and the animal let go, growling as it backed away. Adrian seized the moment, his body screaming in protest as he crawled toward a nearby boulder. He pressed his back against it, using it as a barrier between himself and the bear. His hands fumbled for the bear spray, finally freeing it from its holster. The bear circled him, its growls low and menacing movements deliberate. Blood dripped from its wounds, staining the dirt beneath its paws. Adrian raised the canister, his hand shaking as he prepared to fire. But before he could act, the bear charged again, its massive body colliding with the boulder. The impact force sent Adrian sprawling, the canister flying from his grip. He scrambled to his feet, but his injured leg buckled beneath him. The bear loomed over him, its teeth bared and eyes wild. Adrian raised his knife one last time, but his strength was gone. The animal struck him with a devastating blow, and the world darkened. Days later, a search team found Adrian's body near the ridge. His pack lay nearby, its contents scattered across the ground, and claw marks scarred the surrounding rocks. The grizzly was nowhere to be seen, having returned to the forest after the attack. Adrian's death sent shockwaves through the park and the wider outdoor community. He had been experienced, prepared and cautious, yet none of it had been enough to save him from the unpredictable dangers of the wild. Following the tragedy, Park officials urged hikers to take even greater precautions when venturing into grizzly territory. They emphasized the importance of traveling in groups, making noise to avoid surprising wildlife, and carrying bear spray within easy reach. Adrian's story became a sobering reminder of nature's raw power and the thin line between adventure and survival. For those who followed in his footsteps, the wilderness would never feel the same again. 2024. The dry October air was heavy with the scent of sagebrush as Mark and Jason Keller walked the perimeter of their family's remote ranch in the foothills of Wyoming's Wind River Range. The brothers, aged 37 and 34, had grown up on this land, tending livestock and working long days under the wide open skies. They knew it was a life filled with hard labor and moments of quiet beauty. As the sun climbed over the horizon that morning, they set out to check on sheep grazing in a distant pasture near the forest's edge. The ranch bordered miles of wilderness, a landscape teeming with wildlife. The elder brother, Mark, carried a weathered rifle over his shoulder, a precaution more than anything else. Predators were a rare nuisance, and the brothers had grown confident in handling the occasional coyote or stray wolf. Carrying a pitchfork, Jason trailed behind, scanning the landscape for signs of trouble. The sheep were spread across a gentle slope, their bleats punctuating the morning. As they moved closer, they noticed an unusual tension among the herd. The sheep clustered tightly together, their heads low and their movements skittish. Mark stopped, narrowing his eyes at the tree line. That was when they saw it, a large black bear moving through the underbrush. Its sleek fur was matted in places, and a patch of dried blood stained its side. The bear moved awkwardly, its gait uneven. At first, the brothers were surprised. Black bears were not uncommon in this part of Wyoming, but they rarely came so close to human activity, especially during daylight hours. Something about this bear felt different. Its movements were erratic, and its head swung low as if disoriented. Mark's brow furrowed as he whispered instructions to Jason, gesturing toward the sheep. They both understood the importance of protecting the livestock, but neither realized the danger they were walking into. The brothers began shouting, their voices cutting through the crisp air. They banged their tools against rocks and fence posts, hoping to scare the bear off. It seemed to hesitate momentarily, lifting its head to look at them. But instead of retreating, the bear's posture shifted. Its ears flattened against its head, and it let out a low, guttural growl that rumbled through the valley. It charged. Mark barely had time to react before the bear closed the distance, barreling into him with the force of a freight train. The impact knocked him to the ground, his rifle skidding out of reach. The bear's claws raked across his chest, tearing through his coat and into the flesh beneath. Mark screamed, the sound raw and primal, as he struggled to fend off the massive animal. Jason froze for a split second, the scene unfolding like a nightmare. Then instinct took over. He gripped the pitchfork tightly and thrust the sharp tines at the bear's side. The bear roared, reverberating in Jason's chest like thunder, but it did not relent. It turned its massive head toward him, its dark eyes blazing with fury, and swiped with one powerful paw. The blow sent Jason sprawling, the pitchfork flying from his hands. Pain exploded in his shoulder as he hit the ground, but he forced himself to get up. Blood oozed from his arm, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He reached for a nearby rock and hurled it at the bear, aiming for its head. The stone struck its mark, and for a moment, the bear recoiled. Mark lay motionless on the ground, his breath shallow and labored. Jason staggered toward his brother, his eyes darting between Mark's broken body and the enraged bear. He grabbed a fallen branch, swinging it wildly as the bear advanced again. Desperation fueled his every movement, but the bear was relentless, its injuries and hunger driving it into a frenzy. The fight was brutal and chaotic, the ground around them torn and bloodied. Jason managed to land a few blows, but each effort only seemed to agitate the bear further. It lunged at him, its jaws snapping inches from his face. Jason fell backward, the branch clutched in his trembling hands as the bear loomed over him. He could feel its hot breath, smell the coppery tang of its blood mixed with his own. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the attack ended. The bear stood over Jason momentarily longer, its body heaving with exertion. Its eyes seemed to glaze over as it sniffed the air, and then it turned and lumbered back toward the forest. The brothers were left in the eerie silence of the aftermath, the only sounds of their ragged breathing and the distant bleating of the sheep. Jason crawled to Mark, his heart sinking at the sight of his brother's lifeless eyes staring up at the sky. He pressed his hand to Mark's chest, but there was no heartbeat, no sign of life. Tears blurred his vision as he realized he was too late. Despite his injuries, Jason knew he had to get help. He stumbled to his feet, clutching his bleeding arm, and began the long trek back to the ranch. Every step was agony, but the thought of alerting anyone kept him moving. When he finally reached the ranch house, he collapsed on the porch, his body giving out from pain and exhaustion. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, alerted by a frantic call from Jason's wife. They found Mark's body near the pasture, surrounded by evidence of the violent struggle. Jason was airlifted to the nearest hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery to repair the damage from the bear's claws and teeth. He survived, but the physical and emotional scars would remain with him for the rest of his life. The incident sent shockwaves through the small ranching community. Wildlife experts later determined that the bear had likely been injured in a territorial fight with another bear, leaving it desperate and more aggressive than usual. Its weakened state had driven it closer to human activity in search of an easy meal, leading to the fatal encounter with the Keller brothers. Discussions about wildlife safety and preparedness gained renewed urgency in the following weeks. Ranchers were urged to carry bear spray and ensure they had clear plans for deterring predators without putting themselves at risk. Jason became a reluctant advocate for these measures, sharing his harrowing story to prevent others from making the same mistakes. Mark's death was a devastating loss, a reminder of the fragile balance between humans and the wild. For Jason, the memory of that day would never fade. The sight of his brother fighting for his life, the deafening roars of the bear, and the realization that even the most experienced outdoors people are not invincible in the face of nature's raw power.